What's up, guys? Okay, so you probably watched a couple of these already. If not, welcome to uh, your interwar years slash rise of dictators unit. Broken into different PowerPoints just so you wouldn't have to sit and listen to the same um, boring me talk to a laptop for a half an hour in one shot. This gives you the freedom to watch the three videos at any point that you want. So, this video is about Russia. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so in Russia, what I want you to remember is that Russia exited World War One because they were pretty much in famine. There wasn't a whole lot of food. They just weren't prepared for war. They didn't industrialize like the rest of Europe. Remember, we talked about industrialization. Man, I don't even, that seems like forever ago. January, February, maybe right before we left. I don't, what day is it? I don't know. So Russia left World War One, and when they did, Tsar Nicholas II was the leader. That's who you're looking at to the right. If you are into Russian history or you are into historical conspiracy theories, check out the Romanovs. They they have a interesting family lineage at the end. So Tsar Nicholas II is the leader of Russia when they leave World War One, and their industrialization is just behind Europe. They weren't prepared for war, and because they weren't prepared for war, they tried to industrialize really fast. They weren't able to pay workers as much as they needed to. They were really bad working conditions. They didn't have any rights. There were no unions at the time in any country. So if that's what you're thinking right now, like, oh, they should have unionized, that wasn't a thing. Um, in Russia, a lot of people believed that the working class, which remember we call the proletariat, they should rule society. Now, that idea comes from the fact that you have a king, essentially he's a czar, but he's a king telling everyone how the world should be. And if you don't have any money and you don't have any livelihood and you're starving, that's you probably don't agree with Tsar Nicholas here. If you are working in a mine or working in a factory next to someone and all day you talk about how you're hungry and how you don't have any food and all your kids are hungry and they're not getting an education, eventually that starts a movement of why does someone above me who is not exposed to what I'm being exposed to on a daily basis get to tell me how my life should go? We should be in charge. We're the ones working. And that that concept, that idea, is really what sparks the Russian Revolution. That idea, that group becomes known as the Bolsheviks, and they are led by Vladimir Lenin. They believe that the working class should rule society. Vladimir Lenin gains popularity very quickly in Russia because of this idea and because of how many people fall into that mold that the Bolsheviks can kind of bolster. They promise that government will be run by the working class, not by the rich. And Tsar Nicholas steps down after World War One. His brother actually is supposed to take the throne, and his brother doesn't want it either. Then the Romanovs disappear, but that's a different history lesson. So Russia's not doing so well, but they are now run by Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks. So there's Lenin. He's kind of scary looking. So Lenin and the Bolsheviks take power. As they promised, the working class now is in charge, which is kind of ironic because Lenin isn't part of the working class, but hey, whatever. That's how it goes. I'm just here to tell you how it went. So they give all farmland to all peasants. So now they are in control of their own farming. Factories are controlled by the workers. Anyone who was considered, they call them undesirables. Anyone who wasn't consciously contributing to society or pulling their weight, or they just weren't doing their part. They were sent to the gulags. That's what this word is right here. Maybe you've heard that before. The Basically they were sent to like a death camp and they would die. Um, so you definitely didn't want to be sent to the gulags. That was the encouragement for everyone to work together. Russia signed a treaty to get out of World War One. So what I want you to think about in this situation is uh, how this would play out. So if all all of society in Russia, let's look at farmers, just for instance. Just, although this happened in factories too, let's just look at farmers. So, farmers, and if all people had control of their own food, and they knew that if you grew your own food, then you would eat your own food. Well, who's to say that everyone's going to work equally? I think some of you would work really, really hard and grow your own food. And I think there'd always be people that wouldn't work so hard and wouldn't grow their own food and would rely on everyone else to give them some of theirs or steal some of theirs. Just things to think about. Okay, so Russia is controlled by the Bolsheviks and Lenin. They wanted to rid the government of the elite, of the aristocrats, and have them run by the proletariats. Now, that transforms into the Communist Party. They kind of rename themselves, they remarket themselves, if you will. They start to follow the idea of Karl Marx, and Karl Marx was a huge fan of communism. In communism, there's no classes in society, so there is no proletariat, there's no middle class, there's no lower class, there's no upper class. Everyone is equal because everyone shares everything. That's what Karl Marx wanted. That's kind of the idea of communism. Now, here's the problem. Lenin dies. Lenin also has a stroke, and if you watch the Hitler video, you know that Hindenburg had a stroke. Now Lenin's having a stroke. Joseph Stalin takes power. He's second in command to Lenin. Here's a picture of Stalin. It's not funny, but the funny thing about Stalin is that when Lenin was in power, Lenin was afraid of Stalin and the fact that if Lenin knew that if Stalin took power, he would probably take too much power and things would get out of hand. And he said that. He's on record saying that. Spoiler alert, I guess. Stalin killed way more people than Adolf Hitler. Astronomically bigger numbers than Adolf Hitler. Nobody ever talks about Stalin. They always assume that Adolf Hitler is the worst one and how he created a whole genocide. It was actually Stalin who was way worse. So Stalin builds a totalitarian type government. He creates a secret police, very similar to Hitler. He monitors phone lines. He is recorded for 8 to 13 million deaths. I've seen that number as high as 25 million deaths, just because these stats are very hard to track, because if you are killing millions and millions of people, you don't want that publicly known, so it's very hard for historians to go back and look at how many people actually died, because a lot of them we just don't know that number. So I would say anywhere from 8 to 25 million people. One of the big things that you will see with all these dictators is the push for propaganda. They need propaganda. Think about North Korea. In North Korea right now, they push propaganda because they want everything to seem like it's great. All of these dictators that we're looking at, same idea. They want everyone in Europe to think that everything is great and you don't have it any worse than anyone else. You have it the best. Every single person in the world wants to be you. That's what we're pushing through propaganda. Stalin does the same thing. Education looks very similar to Hitler. We're pushing all of the Communist Party manifesto. We're preaching how good it is for the Communist Party and everyone else. That's a horrible idea. There is no religion in Russia, which I think is kind of interesting. The Communist Party pushes this idea of atheism, and that God is a superstition. That the idea behind this is they don't want anyone to believe in something else. Only thing they want Russians to believe in is the Communist Party. There is no God, okay? Because if you're looking to a higher power, then you think something is better than the Communist Party, which is kind of crazy. And then they're eliminating all competition. The government controls all the businesses in the country, so there is no other competition. If you want bread, you have one choice to where to get bread. If you want a car, not that anyone could afford one, but if you wanted a car, you have one choice for a car. There it is. Okay, I just pulled this from the textbook that you guys don't have with you and you don't need. But I kind of like this graphic. So there's different aspects of totalitarianism. And thought you might like to look at this. Pause it if you want to read it. Okay. Um, the last part about Stalin is that he wanted to push Russia forward. I definitely 100% don't agree with what Stalin did, but I think at his core, he was really trying to push Russia to industrialize and get Russia to the same level of economy that all the rest of Europe was in, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Russia was behind. He just didn't do it in a good way at all. So Stalin actually sets up a 5-year plan for Russia, and the idea is to push their factories forward, um, and do that in whatever way possible. The only problem is when you are rapidly building a factory, you are uh, forcing people to work way harder than they can physically work. And when that happens and they're working all the time, there's no food. And so we start this thing called collective farming, where only some people are farming and then they're sharing it amongst everyone else. It doesn't go well. Uh, Collective farming normally leads to starvation, which is what happened in Russia. Okay, so there's Stalin.